Summer's over and training camp is here. The Carolina Panthers rookies reporting today on Monday. What are some of the top storylines involving this year's rookie class that we should be monitoring over the next couple of weeks? We'll talk about that right here on Lathan Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council. Yes, the mailbag's still in hiatus, but we'll figure that out here as we get closer to the season. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. We made it. We are here. Summer is over for me and for everyone else who will be out there covering training camp, but also, more importantly, it's over for your Carolina Panthers as we are one step closer to having football officially back. In training camp, it's awesome to have. It's a nice little tease. Preseason, same way. But we still got a little bit of time before we finally get to see toe meet leather down there in Duval County as Panthers open up the season on the road against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But on today's show, let's take a look at the Panthers rookie class as they are reporting to camp today on Monday, and want to look at a couple of storylines that we should be tracking throughout the next couple of weeks as Dave Canales talked about this was the most impressive rookie class he's ever been around since his time dating back to Seattle, his 1 year in Tampa, and of course, last season, his first season in Carolina as the Panthers head coach. So looking at some of the storylines, start off with some of the top guys that you're obviously going to be wanting to see how they perform, or wanting to know how they perform once camp open up on Wednesday morning here in Uptown Charlotte. And the top storyline to me has to go with the guy who they took 8th overall, the guy they decided to not move back to get more picks from for, and decided that this is who we want to get at the wide receiver position. And of course, I'm talking about Tetairoa McMillan, the 8th overall pick from Arizona. And I've stated this since he was taken, that the expectations for a top 10 pick, no matter what the position, are always going to be higher than the expectations for a guy taken 32nd overall, unless that guy, I suppose, is Lamar Jackson, as we know, has gone on to be a 2-time NFL MVP, but also plays a different position. So aside from taking what would be wildly 2 quarterbacks in back-to-back years in the first round, one of them, I guess that's not the craziest thing that's happened before, but still, just looking at this in particular with Leggett and with McMillan, Leggett was in a much deeper wide receiver class and really a more talented, at least top heavy. We're going to go that way. Still depth, as there is every year when it comes to wide receivers, but he was in a class where they were the cream of the crop there at the beginning. Marvin Harrison Jr., Roma Dunze, Malik Neighbors, and there's some other guys like Xavier Worthy and Brian Thomas Jr. who were really attractive. And then depending on how you felt about certain guys like Ricky Pearsall, Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey, Xavier Leggett, that's when they kind of filtered in there at the end of the first round and the beginning of the second round. And had Carolina not had the relationship that they have with Buffalo, that being Brandon Beane, the former assistant general manager here in Carolina and current GM up there in Buffalo, and Dan Morgan having, of course, been here in Carolina, having worked under Brandon Beane, I don't know if the Panthers are able to move up one whole spot in really one night from 33 to 32 to be able to get Xavier Leggett at that spot and also get the what could be very important 50-year option that they'll have to decide after the 2026 season. But you look at it, though, like, okay, he's a first-round pick, obviously, but he also wasn't going to be, which is fine. That's not a big deal at all. But there still would have been expectations for him to be a top guy, knowing that the Panthers really need to work on that wide receiver core after the disastrous 2023 season and how a lot of those guys, minus Adam Thielen, did not work out for the team. But I'm looking at things now with a guy being taken into top 10 and looking at the numbers that Harrison Jr., that Neighbors, and Adunze put up not only last year, but back in college, pretty similar to what Tetairoa McMillan did. And he's going in the top 10. So if there's going to be any sort of comparisons, it should be with those guys and not really with anybody who was taken in the 20s or in the 30s from a season ago. So I am very curious to see how quickly he settles into a starting role. I know he ran a little bit with the first team back in the spring when they're just mix and matching. It's not really that important what a guy is doing back in the spring. But now that they are going to be there in training camp, going to be a little bit of time before they're in pads, this is when it really matters. This is when jobs are actually going to be up for grabs. And I get that because he was a top 10 pick, that the politics of the NFL are eventually going to put him in that spot. But I do think, though, from based off what we saw last year, that Dave Canales is going to make him have to earn it just a little bit. And it's a crowded room. There's some veteran guys in there who there's a lot of questions about what they're going to be able to provide and what the role is going to be. Some even for some returning guys, and maybe not Leggett, but it could possibly be Leggett, who we have to figure out what his role is going to be in this offense, in this passing game. But I'm really curious to see how quickly T-Mac is able to settle into a role, and if he will be that day one starter, which I would think should be the expectation for somebody who gets taken that high. And speaking about being taken high, if you go on day 2 in the second and third round, the expectation also for you as a player is that you're going to end up being an immediate contributor. Will you be immediate high-level contributor? Really depends on the opportunity and your talent level overall. But to me, clearly, Nick Scourton and Prince Umanmielen, the eyes are going to be on them this week and in the following weeks and heading into the year to just see what Carolina has in these two edge rushers. And I know there's a lot of people who were curious about Nick Scourton not signing and what was going on. From my understanding, back after the draft, the Texans decided that they were going to give their second-round pick, Jaden Higgins, the wide receiver out of Iowa State, a fully guaranteed deal, which was the first time that's happened in NFL history. And he got taken, I think, 34th. So as soon as that happened, the guy in front of him, he had to get a fully guaranteed deal. And then all the agents were working to get more guarantees for their guys as second rounders are now trending into direction like with first rounders where they're going to get fully guaranteed deals moving forward. So that was really the issue, is that Nick Scourton, his agency, they just needed to watch the dominoes fall and see what the percentages guys ahead of them were getting. I believe it's everybody up until the 40th overall pick, which is Tyler Shuck down to New Orleans. I believe all those guys got fully guaranteed deals, and then it went down from there with a lot of the dudes there in the second round. So that was what the holdup was with Nick Scourton, and deadline spur action, as we saw, as this got done last week. And of course, today, the Panthers rookies are reporting. So there was never going to be any issue about him holding out, not being there at camp day one. He'll be there, but a lot of focus is clearly going to be on him. And it's going to be on Umanmielen because the Panthers decided to not take one, but take two edge rushers there on that Friday night back in April. And then a couple weeks after that, they decided to move on from their veteran and I would say probably their best pass rusher in Jadeveon Clowney, as he was the big free agency signing a year ago, so that they could get Scourton and Umanmielen along with Patrick Jones II and DJ Wonnum on the field as their primary quartet of pass rushers this upcoming season. Was it quartet or is it quintet? Quartet. This is a room, though, that you look at that has zero high-level NFL production. And that's not to speak poorly of DJ Wonnum and what he can potentially provide in Carolina and what Patrick Jones can potentially provide. But if you look at their career so far, these guys have not been high-level contributors ever. And 8 sacks is really good, but they have not been that all-pro, Pro Bowl type of player. And the hope is when you take Scourton in the second round and you have a first-round grade on him, and you take Umanmielen in the third round, and he's also a guy that played really well in the SEC last year, earning first-team honors, that these two will end up being your primary duo on the edge for years to come. So that, to me, and I told y'all last week when ranking the position groups that I felt like edge rusher was the worst. Why? Because the two guys that you just took have not played. very talented, but I can't go off of just they're very talented and say that, oh, that's going to be a solid group. It could very well be. But looking at the veterans in the room, they don't impress me to the point to where I feel confident about them plus 2 rookies coming in and just having a complete renaissance what we've seen as far as the pass rush over the last couple of seasons. But I am excited to see what Scourton and what Umanmielen are able to do moving forward here in Carolina. So looking at those 2 guys, looking at Tetairoa McMillan, those 3 players in particular have my eye. But it's not just them. I got my eye on a couple other guys on the rookie draft class and also some UDFAs. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You already follow the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5, get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. This is an ad by BetterHelp. Workplace stress is at an all-time high. 61% of the global workforce is reporting higher than normal stress levels. This summer is the perfect time to take small steps to focus on your wellness and manage the challenges that come with your workday. Of course, most of us can't just quit our jobs or take endless vacations, but we can start small. Whether it's getting outside for a few minutes, adding movement into your day, or talking to someone who can help you navigate life's challenges, that's where BetterHelp comes in. Do you have any boundaries you've been wanting to set? Therapy can help you set healthier boundaries at work so stress doesn't spill over into the rest of your life. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Carolina Panthers rookies reporting to camp today here in Uptown Charlotte. We're taking a look at some of the top storylines with this group to talk about and look at over the next couple of weeks as we have training camp. Unfortunately, as you all know, fans will not be allowed at training camp this year. Next Saturday night will be Fan Fest up in Bank of America Stadium. So hopefully you're able to get the tickets to go to that. If not, I will still be out there, boots on the ground on Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. I'm going to be out there as much as possible. Do have some NASCAR obligations that will take me away next weekend, but I will be out there. And if I'm not able to make a training camp practice, always going to be trying to hit up one of my media buddies to get them to come on the show to let me know what they saw and to break it down. It's really tough to talk about training camp if you're not at training camp. So that's what I'll be doing here over the next couple of days and weeks as we are finally here one step closer to the beginning of the 2025 NFL season here in Carolina. I mentioned this a couple of times over the last couple of weeks because, look, I'm looking at my calendar. I left Charlotte on June 28th. Came back on the 6th, was here on July 7th, 8th, and 9th, and then I was gone from the 10th until the 20th. So I have barely been in this city. So I was banking a ton of shows to get some time off here, as this is really the only time prior to camp where I can really take time off all year long with NASCAR and with this. So I kept telling y'all when talking about the defense, talk about safeties in particular, that if the Panthers made a signing for a veteran safety, my bad, because I had to get all these shows out there done earlier than, well, the time they actually came out, and like weeks sometimes before they actually came out. But fortunately, even if maybe you rolled your eyes and hated that disclaimer, Carolina did not make any big moves. I did not miss out on reacting to that live with y'all, as I always love to do whenever there's any sort of big kind of news that goes out there. But we sit here hanging in camp, and on this Monday, Carolina is still not gone out there and signed a veteran safety, which means Lathan Ransom, you're probably up, my guy, as a rookie 4th rounder out of the Ohio State University, fresh off a national championship, and a solid player. and someone who I think obviously they're excited about and was necessary and hell, I think required that Carolina got out of that draft back in April with a safety. Would have liked to have been earlier, but then you look at things, I was pretty vocal on they needed to get a receiver and getting Tetairoa McMillan 8th overall. I'm not mad about that. Day 2, yeah, they needed edge rushers. And when you're coming away with Scourton and Umanmielen, and we don't know how it's going to play out, but on paper, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, getting Trevor Etienne right away, okay, not the maybe most favorite pick, but they did eventually address the position with Lathan Ransom. But right now, you look at it, it's Javon Merrick, it's Devine Richardson, it's Lathan Ransom, and then it's Nick Scott, really truly here to play special teams more than actually to be a key factor, I would think, defensively for this team. We will see how things play out because this is football. It's a war of attrition, and there will be injuries. Of course, knock on wood, nothing serious. But what's the plan for Lathan Ransom? Is the plan for Ajero to go out there and play him right away? I don't know. Mike Kay, who actually going to be coming on the show tomorrow, he's been on the show and mentioned before that Ajero really hasn't played a lot of rookies in his 3 years as a DC, the 1 year in Denver, the 2 years here in Carolina, unless he had really no choice because, well, injuries happen. But right now, there's just not a ton of bodies in that room and a ton of experience to where, I mean, Lathan's going to have to get some meaningful first team snaps starting out camp. Now, will that be representative of how things play out this season? Maybe not. But as I mentioned before as well, with Troy Hill a couple years ago, last year with the trade for Mike Jackson, the Panthers have waited even all the way to the last week of the preseason to finally address somebody or a position and bring somebody in who's going to come in and be a starter for them that year. So there's some veteran guys out there. We know the names. We've talked about them before that are still available. And I'm guessing they're going to wait a little bit longer before wanting to go out there in this summer heat as we're getting to the dog days next month in August, and then they'll be ready to sign on and go out there and help this team out there and at that safety position. So with the plan for Lathan Ransom, that's something I'm really going to be looking at once I get out there on Wednesday and beyond. Special teams, that is always the best way for guys who are taken on day 3 to make the team. Now, if you're a 4th rounder like Ransom and like Trevor Etienne, you're probably going to be safe, but you get to the 5th round, 6th round, 7th round, of course, you're going to have to contribute on special teams. And Dave Canales talked about this with the wide receiver room when looking at them, that it's going to come down to the preseason games, but also who can help us on special teams, because not everybody is going to be asked to be a pass catcher. Their job's going to be something completely different. And looking at 2 guys taken on day 3, Trevor Etienne and Jimmy Horn Jr., their jobs are not going to be what you think their jobs would be as far as just like the position that they play, like Trevor Etienne, running back. You're not going to be running the ball very often this year with Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle. And of course, that's another knock on wood situation because injuries do happen, but the plan is not for him to be a big part of this offense. I would think things can change. Plans certainly have changed in the past, but when you sign Rico Dowdle, when you give Chuba Hubbard the extension you gave him last year, and they're both in the backfield this season, even if you take somebody in the 4th round, like Etienne, you're not asking them probably to do anything more than be a 3rd down back and potentially a guy who can return kickoffs, which he did not do last year at Georgia as he battled through injuries, but something he did his first 2 years down in Gainesville at Florida. So I would expect that would be his role, maybe also as a 3rd down back. Then with Jimmy Horn Jr., absolutely, as the last guy taken by the Panthers back in April, his role on this team is going to have to be as a return man. This will be somebody I'm interested to hear about his injury status, as he did miss time in the spring of a hamstring, and he's going to have to be ready to go after having about the last 6 weeks to rest up and to get that muscle strong and ready to go, because if he wants to make the team, it's probably going to be as a returner. And we did see last year with Dave and with Dan and Brant that they kept all the guys that they drafted, did not have that big of a draft class a year ago compared to what they have this season. But still in a crowded wide receiver room where I'm wondering, Hunter Renfrow, is that the same Hunter Renfrow that we saw back to last time he was healthy in Las Vegas when he was a Pro Bowler. Are the Carolina Panthers going to get that guy? We're talking about with T-Mac. If he comes in, he's going to be a top 3 guy. That pushes guys down the depth chart like a Jalen Coker and David Moore. I'm sure there's not a ton of people out there super giddy about David Moore because of some of the younger guys out there, maybe guys that you're far more familiar with, but still, he has a relationship with this coaching staff dating back to their time in Seattle. So he will be somebody that they value, and Jimmy Horn's going to have to go get that job, and it's going to be, I think, as a returner, whether it's as kickoff return, punt return. That's somebody who I'm really, really going to be focused on, as I always really curious about how that kind of situation plays out, especially knowing that those are some of the guys that are going to be battling for a roster spot right at the back end of the roster. So Trevor Etienne, Jimmy Horn Jr., day 3 guys, one of them, Etienne, certainly safe. The other one, Horn, could be battling and has a chance to make it as a returner in all likelihood. But there's other rookies to focus on in the draft class and also some UDFAs to keep our eyes out on. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast. On average, in 15 minutes, effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rougiette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to Rougiette.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information. A couple of more storylines to look at as Panthers rookie class reported today on Monday, or at least reports today on Monday, depending upon when you're watching and listening to this. I want to touch on everybody from the draft class, along with some of the UDFAs. And Mitchell Evans, that's somebody who absolutely I'm looking at, the 5th rounder from Notre Dame. When he was taken, I wondered, is he the most complete tight end on the roster, just considering that he had been a blocker early on in his career in South Bend behind Michael Mayer. Then he turned into a really good pass catcher his junior season before tearing his ACL. And then last year, coming back off of the ACL tear, was instrumental in helping Notre Dame get to the national title game where they faced off against Lathan Ransom and his Ohio State Buckeyes. Now coming in, Evans is somebody who, with Tommy Trimble, a fellow Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and his status up in question. We'll find more about that on Tuesday, as again, that's when the vets report, and we'll hear from at least Dan Morgan. I believe Dave Canales probably talk, but Dan Morgan's going to be a little bit more. It's important just personnel-wise. I don't know what's going on there, what the plan is for some other positions like safety that you would like to see addressed prior to the season going on. But we'll find out more about the injury statuses for some of those guys and whether they may have to start off the season on PUP or not. It's still up really questionable with Tommy. Some of the wording was confusing that was used by Dave. But we'll find out again tomorrow and see how that all plays out. But I still like the pick of Mitchell Evans. And I think that with him, and then with JT Sanders, who slimmed down, who did really impress as far as a blocker last year, when that was a concern going to the season, considering that that's not really what was his forte at Texas, as he's a really good receiving tight end. And now you have a guy, Mitchell Evans, who's been a solid blocking tight end, who's been a good receiving tight end. And then he's also now 1 year removed from that ACL tear, because typically it's the season after you come back where you really get back to being your old self. And I am excited to see what he can provide and just how long he's going to have to fill in that role while Tommy Trimble tries to fight back from that back injury that he had to have surgery on back in the spring. So that's a guy who, even when Trimble comes back, I'm going to be locked on maybe on what he's able to do on this Panthers team. Cam Robinson, the last guy I'll talk about from the rookie class. You look at the defensive line, in particular defensive tackle, Panthers addressed that. a ton in free agency. You got Derek Brown coming back. They're going to look at that as a free agent addition. I understand he's already under contract, not technically a free agent addition, but he's a guy that they had to add back to the roster that they didn't really have last year. And he's one of the top defensive tackles in the NFL. And according to Locked On NFL, he's the number 98 player in our top 100. Go check out all that content that the guys put together last week. But Derek Brown, good player. And now you got Ashawn Robinson back. They had a Bobby Brown III, had Turk Wharton to rotate around him. You got Shai Tuttle in a more reduced role, and you have Jaden Crumedy. Like, I'm looking at Crumedy and Tuttle and Robinson and really focus in on like that camp battle in seeing, is Robinson going to be able to kind of push off a guy who got drafted last year in Crumedy, or is he going to get rid of Tuttle, who is a veteran who did take a pay cut and is going to be seen as a backup this year anyways? And he's a run stopper, and we know how poor the Panthers have been against the run. I mean, last year was the worst that we've ever seen, but years prior to that, it's not really been great either. So that is something that I'm really looking at, Cam Robinson, but really the UDFAs, can never forget about them. And when I look at just undrafted free agents, I'm always looking at what is the opportunity for them to make the team. At quarterback, last year, Jack Plummer, undrafted free agent, and they gave him an opportunity to be a developmental guy in the preseason. Looked less than stellar, but they still later on brought him, kept him on the roster as a practice squad player, which that counts as being on the roster to me. He's got 69 guys, got 53 on the active, got 16 on the practice squad, one international pathways program player if you want one, and you can elevate those practice squad guys. So that does count as the roster, maybe not the 53, but still, like, he was able to stick around because of that. And then he later on finished off the season on the active roster. As we know, Jalen Coker was a guy who made a big impact offensively as an undrafted free agent at that wide receiver spot. And we look also at Damani Richardson, who had an impact there at safety. And now both of those guys, Richardson in particular, coming into the year with expectations to be solid players yet again. And not saying that Coker's not going to be, just a lot of up in the air still for me when evaluating this wide receiver room, and excited to see what they look like once they get out there later on this week and in the coming weeks. So I look at this year, like wide receiver, yeah, there's an opportunity. Safety did not appear to be an opportunity, but Richardson went out there and took the job. Safety this year, I look at the opportunity because, again, they have not brought in a veteran. I think they will do that. So that then takes away potential opportunity that could be there. But there's a trio of undrafted free agent safeties that could have that chance. And then defensive line. Probably wouldn't think there'd be an opportunity there, but Jared Harrison-Hunt, they gave him a pretty nice guarantee when they signed him to that undrafted free agent deal. Maybe he can push his way through, and maybe he's the one who forces a Jaden Crumedy off the roster and a Shai Tuttle off the roster, and it's not Cam Robinson who's the one who's doing that. And receiver would be very tough for that to happen again, considering who they've added to the roster via free agency and the draft. Running back, hard to see it there as well, but that's always something to look at. And I mean, in recent years, whether it was, Rule or Ike, and now we look at last year with this staff in particular, which is far more meaningful, they've taken undrafted guys and they have allowed them to play. Now, injuries kind of were a part of it for both Coker and Richardson, but both those guys also earned their spot. So we'll see if they evaluated properly yet again with this undrafted free agent class heading into camp in a couple of days. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe and follow the show free over on YouTube, or if you listen to your favorite podcast, can have all the training camp coverage that you need throughout the week here on the channel. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, where if I'm at camp, which I will be, probably going to be providing you some live updates. Check me out there, and also hit me up in my DMs with any questions that you have. And also just at me over on Blue Sky as well if you need to do so. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always. Keep pounding. And tomorrow, Mike K from the Charlotte Observer going to join me to preview training camp for the Carolina Panthers coming up here on Tuesday on Locked On Panthers.